I'll go where you want me to go, dear Lord, or mountain or plain or sea. I'll say what you want me to say, dear Lord. I'll be what you want me to be. Amen. Just turn the page a couple there to number 84. 84. The songs are certainly linked in a fashion there. Amen. Yeah, go ahead and stand with me. Yeah, go ahead and stand with me. I'm satisfied with just a cottage below, a little silver and a little gold, but in that city where the ransom will shine, I want a gold one that's silver lined. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop in that bright land where we'll never grow old. And someday yonder we will never more wander, but walk on streets that are purest gold. Number 3. Don't think me poor or deserted or lonely. I'm not discouraged. I'm heaven bound. I'm just a pilgrim in search of that city. I want a mansion, a harp and a crown. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop in that bright land where we'll never grow old. And someday yonder we will never more wander, but walk on streets that are purest gold. Amen and amen. Now let's go to the Lord in prayer. I wonder if Brother Ferguson, if you could open us in prayer this morning.
Lord, we ask that you be with us during these morning services and help us be motivated to in church as Pastor gives the lesson. We'll be able to glean something that we can carry with us throughout our week and help us throughout the day. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Classes, you may head downstairs. Everybody else may stay up here if you're so inclined. Well, we were in Nehemiah last week, I think. Let's go to the book of Esther. Let's go into the book of Esther. It's page 725 in my Bible, 725. If that helps you, then I guess that helps you. If it doesn't, well, I'm sorry. Book of Esther. When we look at the book of Esther, we get a kind of an interesting glimpse. We get an account here of the exiled Jews under the Babylonian Persian rule. It kind of gives the impression that the Gentiles kind of have an ill feeling toward the Jews, and that's oftentimes the case when we look at it. But as we go through the book of Esther, and we're not going to do the entire, we'll go through the entire premise of the book, I suppose, this morning, but we're not going to certainly read the whole book this morning, or that'll certainly spill into the service. But we have a couple of things here that we want to understand, and that is that, number one, that God
still loves Israel. He still loves the Jews. He's still active in the Jews' lives, even though they have sinned. They're in captivity. But he never stops loving his people, even though they may sin against him. And that is certainly a principle that applies to us as well, that God never stops loving us just because we are out in sin. There may be some fellowship breaks, but God will provide paths for us to come back to Him. He does so in the book of Esther for Israel as well. And secondly, that God is always in control. We may go through points in our life where we're wondering if God is in control of this situation, and the short and quick answer to that is yes. And He may be giving us an opportunity for growth. He may be giving us an opportunity to see things in our lives that may need to change, but God is always there. There's a thought that I had in my head many years ago before I was saved, and that was just that God had placed us here and had kind of abandoned us. And of course, I didn't believe in the God of the Bible. I didn't believe in Jehovah at that point. But I believed that we were just created and left here on our own devices, and that God would appear however He wanted to. That is certainly not the case in truth here. But God is in and active in the affairs of men to bring about His plan for His people. And we see that as we look through the book of Esther. Now, of course, we have a couple of different folks that come to mind when we think about the book of Esther. The name that I always think of, and kind of going in with the vein of names, names that we don't name our kids anymore very often, right? Names that don't come to mind when we think, I think this would be a great name for my kid. And that would be, what's the name that comes to mind in Esther? That you wouldn't name your kid, or that you would name your kid? I would name my kid Mordecai or Mordecai. Haman, right? Haman's not a name that you go, you know what a good name would be? Haman, right? That would certainly not be the name that I would pick for my child based on the book of Esther. And of course, so you have Mordecai, you have Haman, and the third name, of course, is Esther, right? That we go into there. And you see, the fun names that we have in here. The king's name in the days of Ahasuerus is one of those fun names. We could butcher that name if we wanted to. I've always pronounced it that way. If it's wrong, I will probably never change the way that I pronounce Ahasuerus. I could call him Ahasuerus, or I've heard people say that, or Ahasuerus, and they just kind of fumble over it. I heard one preacher, he wasn't even going to attempt it. He said, now it came to pass in the days of which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia. He didn't want to offend anybody on his pronunciation. But we look at Esther, and we're going to bring here, we're going to tell the story a little bit, and we're going to bring out some of the details as a study and apply it to our lives. But we begin in chapter number 1, that it says, of course, now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus that this is Ahasuerus which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia over 127 provinces, that in those days when the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the palace, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the provinces before him, right? He called them all unto him. When he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days. I was, fun fact there, I was watching a video, it was a trivia question video, and there were 4 people that had no idea what a score was. And I thought that was kind of crazy, that 4 people. I can see catching one person off guard, and they had no idea what a score. But you think of our history of America, 4 right? So 4 days there, and 180 days, 180 days, that's a long feast, right? That's a lot of food and drink. And when these days were expired, made a feast unto all the people that were present in Shushan the palace, both unto great and small. 7 days, big one, in the court of the garden of the king's palace. And we go on through here. And it says in verse number 10, on the seventh day when the heart of the king was merry with wine. And here we have, of course, he has been drinking. He wants to parade his queen before everybody, and that's Vashti, or Vashti, if you're so inclined to say it that way. Vashti, the queen, and he wants to bring her out. And we know the account, and we'll blaze through this real quick here. But she refuses to come. She's like, I'm not going to be a showpiece. I'm not going to come just because you command me to. And he gets very, very angry about it. And when we look at this in hindsight from the rest of the book of Esther, we find that God is providing a way to put Esther in the place where she needs to be at the time that she is needed. God is providing a way here. He is using the actions of an ungodly king and an ungodly nation in order to enact his will. And we see that many times. Not just biblically, but I think through the history of the world, that God can use the sinfulness of man, if you will. God can use the hard-heartedness of man's heart to enact his will. One of the largest examples of this is absolutely the cross, that God used the hard-heartedness of the Jews and the unwillingness of the Jews to recognize their Messiah in order to enact his plan. And much of this, and the one thing that we want to make sure that we remember is it wasn't that God was surprised about it and took opportunity for it. God in time past understood what the decisions and the minds of mankind were going to be, and he enacted his plan based on his foreknowledge of everything that was to be. And in enacting that plan, those are two words that are hard to put right next to each other for me, but he enacted that plan based on his foreknowledge, based on the hard-heartedness and the sinfulness of mankind. And in this case, he is using the king and he is using Vashti to enact what needs to happen in order to put Esther in a place where she can help her people. After all, we know the account here, and we'll get to Haman in a quick minute here. But if Haman's plan had been successful, then all of the Jews would have been eradicated. And that cannot be because of a couple of things, but especially because of one thing, and that is because God had promised that all the nations would be blessed through Abraham's lineage and through the Jews. So that could not be, it's not a possibility that the Jews will be eradicated at any moment because they have been given a promise by God. And if God makes a promise, he will keep that